I'd like to tell you about this very special house that I visited today. It reminds me of those days we have only read about and yearned for. (1730) Shanwar Wada, the heart of Pune. The Peshwas constructed this royal wada only to be imitated in no time by minor lords and merchants. The wadas emerged as a form of domestic architecture in response to the social characteristics of the times. The wada or courtyard house was derived from the West Asians and the ubiquitous house type of the tropics. It was essentially a house with one or many courtyards. The rooms looked onto the courtyards. A huge gateway flanked by devris meant for the gatekeeper gave entry to the wada. But the dindi darwaza or the wicket gate within the large gate was normally used. What makes wadas unique is the essentially introverted plan. A typical wada had no courtyards outside its walls. It wasn't required. They had all the space and privacy within the walls. It made good spatial sense to concentrate open space in the heart of the building. The courtyard was also a focal point for verandas and passages. A composite structure of timber frame and masonry arranged around modest courtyards formed the basic vocabulary of the wadas. The timber frame carried the load of timber floors and of the roof. The massive masonry walls support themselves. Walls are about a meter thick on the ground floor, built in brick and mud, and sometimes in the locally available basalt stone. These thick walls keep the insides cool in summers and warm in winters, and most effectively cut off the noise from the street. These were vignettes from the past. How much of this past is incorporated in today's architecture and in today's demands of modern living? And how effectively? This house, the Bapat Wada, is a standing example of it. Nothing here is really new. Most of its elements have been taken from the traditional architecture of Pune. This, however, is a house with a difference. This place was built by dismantling an old wada of Pune and was built with many improvisations. There is no denying the modern finish to the place, but the flavor is essentially traditional. It goes beyond merely sticking familiar fragments of the past onto a contemporary building. These fragments, in fact, form the foundation of this house. When you enter the house, you're not greeted by a closed room, but an open courtyard. The courtyard our forefathers took for granted. The courtyard which was the heart and soul of any wada. The rooms from the old Wada have been recreated here just as they were. There are wooden beams at the distance of every 6 feet on the ceiling and on the posts in the wall. The distance between the two beams or between the two posts is known as a khan. The rooms here are approximately of 3 khan. The windows and doors are placed centrally between 2 posts. Due to such discipline, they come in line with each other or exactly opposite to each other. Because of the placement of the windows, you can see through each room to the courtyard. Along with this, the house has acquired a kind of transparency and spaciousness. The windows are placed only 1 foot above the floor, so that there is closer link between the outside and the inside spaces. So what are the traditional elements of a Wada that can be incorporated in a modern house?
The traditional architecture developed variety of devices to facilitate the indoor living as well as outdoor living. For example, the roofs with the typical clay tiles projected quite way beyond the walls, and these projections provided a play of light and shade on the surfaces, on the facades of the building.
The courtyard, I think, is definitely a case in point where we can use it, modify it, and transform it for today's use.
The other one was the windows, which started from the floor levels, the low type of windows, as most of the activities indoors were conducted sitting on the floor, whether it was sleeping, eating, sitting, or talking to each other, or writing.
There are some of the staircases, some of the balconies that we see in Wadas where there is an element of design, a sense of detail, which is largely lacking in most of our buildings today.
The plan of this house is inspired by the old Wada. This is a formal drawing room. However, as in the old Wada, the most used space is the dining, the baitak, and the angan outside. The dining is attached to a big kitchen, just as in the old house. Notice how the kitchen, the dining, and the baitak are one compact unit. The objective of such an arrangement is to make it easy to interact with guests or even make them involved in your work. In spite of this, the kitchen has its own privacy, just the way women would want. Now let's take a look upstairs. The staircase is taken from the old Wada, which makes an interesting feature at the end of the dining. Above the dining is the study. These long vertical windows are perfect for harsh light conditions. In addition to this, the roof has big overhangs, because of which only soft, reflected light is allowed inside the house. The roof is well insulated. The air between the mangrove tiles and wooden ceiling helps to keep the house warm in winters and cool in summers. Is this how the courtyard looks from up here? But what exactly makes the courtyard the heart and soul of any Wada?
Well, it was the primary focus of all activities. If it was the owner was a businessman or a statesman, all his official work took place in the courtyard. In the rear courtyard, there was the women folk used it for their activities.
These courtyards facilitated conducting of various outdoor chores, household chores. that had to be not conducted within the building but outside the building.
It was a solution to the joint family.
The house reminds us of what we have lost in the name of modernization. It also shows us how old things can be conserved with a difference. I have to leave now, but don't you leave. The resident of the house, architect Meera Bapat, has to say something about it.
This house is old and new at the same time. It almost feels as though I'm in the old house. Successive generations of my family who lived in the old house changed it over time, adapted it to their lifestyle. The way we used it in our generation has been the model for this house. Because of its timber frame construction, it was possible to dismantle it beam by teak beam without much difficulty and re-erect it at this place with some amount of effort, but not impossibly so high. The new house has retained a lot of the old character, and yet it takes advantage of new technology, new materials. It uses solar energy to make it more energy conscious. But what is satisfying is it retains its original serenity, its feel, and yet it's become much more comfortable. And I feel quite happy living here.